What if everything you've been told about calming a crying baby is incomplete? What if the solution is not louder sounds, faster movement, or more stimulation? In Japan, there is a method that doesn't fight the crying. It understands it, and this changes everything. Most parents react to crying as a problem to stop, but neuroscience shows something different. A baby cries because their nervous system is overloaded, not because they are difficult. And here is the critical shift. If you try to overpower the cry, you increase stimulation. And when stimulation increases, the baby's stress response also increases. This is why rocking faster, talking louder, or rushing often makes things worse. Japanese caregivers do the opposite. They slow down, because research in infant regulation shows that babies co-regulate through the adult's nervous system. Your calm becomes their calm. Now pay attention to this. Instead of reacting immediately, they first stabilize themselves. Breathing slows, movements soften, voice lowers, and something subtle starts to happen. The baby begins to mirror that state. This is called co-regulation, and it is one of the most powerful tools in early brain development. But here's what most people miss. This is not about ignoring the baby. It's about controlling the environment before touching the child. Because if the environment stays chaotic, the baby cannot calm down, no matter what you do. Now imagine this moment. A crying baby, two different responses, one filled with urgency, tension, noise, the other slow, grounded, intentional. Which one do you think the baby's brain will follow? Because in the next step, the method goes deeper. It doesn't just calm the baby, it resets their entire nervous system. The moment a baby starts crying, most parents try to stop the sound, but the Japanese method focuses on something deeper, stopping the internal state, not just the noise, because science is clear, crying is not the problem. It is a signal of a dysregulated nervous system. And if you don't regulate the system, the crying will return. Now here's where everything changes. Instead of picking the baby up immediately, Japanese caregivers pause for a few seconds. Not to ignore, but to observe. They read microsignals, breathing pattern, body tension, facial expression, because not all crying is the same. Some cries come from discomfort, others from overstimulation, others from the need for connection, and treating all cries the same creates confusion. This is supported by developmental psychology. Babies communicate before language, and crying is their primary signal system. Now imagine reacting the same way to every signal. The brain receives mixed responses, and over time, regulation becomes harder. But when the response matches the cause, the brain learns safety, and safety reduces stress hormones like cortisol. Here is the critical detail. The caregiver adjusts before acting. If the baby is overstimulated, they reduce light, reduce noise, reduce movement. If the baby seeks connection, they increase physical closeness. And this precision changes everything, because now you are not reacting blindly. You are regulating intentionally. And over time, the baby learns to calm faster. But something even more powerful is happening. The brain is being trained, because in the next stage, the method doesn't just calm the baby, it builds emotional security that lasts for years. Most people think holding a baby is just comfort, but in this method, touch is used with precision, because science shows something powerful. Skin-to-skin contact releases oxytocin, the hormone responsible for bonding and calming. But here is where most parents get it wrong. They pick the baby up quickly, move too much, add stimulation without noticing, and instead of calming, they overload the baby even more. Japanese caregivers do something different. They don't rush. They lift slowly, bring the baby close to the chest, and hold, without unnecessary movement. No bouncing, no shaking, no urgency, just stillness. Because the baby's body feels the adult's heartbeat, the breathing rhythm, the warmth, and the nervous system begins to synchronize. This is called physiological regulation. The baby's heart rate slows, breathing stabilizes, muscle tension reduces. Now imagine the difference. One baby being moved constantly, another being held in quiet stability. The brain reacts completely differently. And here is the hidden layer. The way you hold the baby teaches the baby how to feel safe, not just in that moment, but long-term. Because repeated calm experiences build neural patterns of security, and security reduces future crying. But something even more subtle is happening, because in the next stage, the method uses sound, not to distract, but to regulate the brain directly. Most parents use sound to distract the baby. Songs, toys, voices, constant stimulation. But the Japanese method uses sound very differently, not to entertain, but to regulate the nervous system, because science shows that rhythmic, predictable sounds help stabilize brain activity in infants. Think about it. Inside the womb, the baby hears consistent, repetitive sounds, heartbeat, blood flow, breathing, and after birth, sudden silence or chaotic noise can feel overwhelming. So instead of random sounds, caregivers use low, steady tones, soft humming, gentle, repetitive sounds, slow, consistent vocal patterns, not loud, not fast, not exaggerated, because the brain responds to rhythm. When sound is predictable, the nervous system begins to relax, heart rate decreases, breathing aligns, and the baby shifts from stress to safety. Now compare this: a baby surrounded by random noise versus a baby hearing a calm, steady rhythm. One increases alertness, the other reduces it. And here is the deeper layer. This is not about stopping the cry immediately. It's about guiding the brain into regulation. Because once the brain calms, the crying naturally fades. But there is something even more powerful next. Because in the next step, the method removes something most parents rely on. And that changes everything. Here is a truth most parents don't realize. Trying too hard to calm a baby can actually keep the baby crying. More movement, more talking, more toys. It feels like you are helping, but in many cases, you are increasing stimulation. And science is clear. Babies have immature nervous systems. They cannot filter multiple inputs at once. So when too much happens, the brain goes into overload, and crying increases. Japanese caregivers understand this deeply. So instead of adding more, they remove less movement, less sound, less visual input. They simplify the environment, and something immediate begins to shift. The baby has less to process, the brain slows down, and regulation becomes possible. Now think about this. A baby already overwhelmed, receiving even more stimulation, versus a baby in a quiet, controlled environment. Which one can calm faster? This is why minimalism is not just cultural. It's neurological, because reducing input reduces stress, and when stress decreases, the body naturally returns to balance. But here is where it becomes even more powerful, because in the next stage, the method teaches something long-term, not just calming in the moment, but reducing future crying. Most parents react after the baby cries, but this method focuses on something more powerful, preventing the cry, because science shows that babies feel safer in predictable patterns. When routines are consistent, the brain reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the biggest triggers of stress. In Japan, daily rhythms are carefully maintained. Sleep times, feeding times, transitions, all follow a soft but consistent structure, not rigid, but predictable. And this does something subtle. The baby starts anticipating what comes next, and anticipation reduces anxiety. Now compare this: a baby who never knows what's coming versus a baby whose body expects the next step. One stays alert, the other relaxes, and here is the key detail. This is not about control, it's about stability. Because when the environment is stable, the nervous system doesn't need to stay in defense mode. And over time, the baby cries less, not because they are suppressed, but because they feel safe. But there is something even deeper happening. Because in the next stage, the method builds independence, even in the earliest months. This is where most methods fail. They calm the baby, but they don't teach the baby to calm themselves. And without that, the cycle repeats. In Japan, caregivers don't rush to interrupt every small discomfort. They observe first, because research shows that babies can develop early self-regulation if given the right amount of space. Not neglect, not abandonment, but a controlled pause. A few seconds, enough for the baby's brain to attempt regulation. Sometimes the baby adjusts, sometimes they don't. But when they do, something powerful happens. The brain learns, I can calm myself, and this builds neural pathways of autonomy. Now, imagine the long-term impact. A baby who always depends on external intervention versus a baby who begins to regulate internally. One becomes reactive, the other becomes stable. And this is not about ignoring the baby. It's about timing. Responding too fast removes the learning opportunity. Responding too late creates stress. But responding at the right moment builds balance. and that balance reduces crying over time. But everything comes together in the final stage, because now, it's no longer just about calming, it's about connection. At this point, everything changes, because the goal is no longer just calming the baby. It's creating a state where the baby doesn't need to cry as much, and that comes from one thing: connection, but not the exaggerated kind, not constant stimulation. Quiet, consistent, emotional presence. Science shows that babies who experience secure attachment produce lower baseline cortisol levels, which means less stress, less reactivity, less crying. In Japan, connection is subtle. Eye contact, soft tone, predictable presence, no exaggerated reactions, no emotional spikes. Because babies don't need intensity, they need stability. Now think about this. A baby constantly exposed to emotional highs and lows versus a baby experiencing steady, calm interaction. One becomes sensitive to change, the other becomes grounded, and this grounding creates safety, and safety reduces the need to signal distress. But here's the deeper layer. Connection is built in small moments: feeding, holding, daily routines, not just when the baby cries. And over time, the baby learns something powerful. I am safe even before I need to cry. And when that belief is built, everything shifts. But there is one final piece, because this entire method only works if something is removed, and most parents never realize it. Here is the hidden enemy of calm: urgency. The moment a baby cries, most adults react fast, tense, anxious, and that reaction is felt instantly by the baby. Because babies don't just hear you, they read your nervous system, your breathing, your muscle tension, your tone, and science confirms this. Babies mirror adult emotional states through co-regulation. So, if you are tense, they become more tense. If you rush, their system accelerates. And the crying continues. Japanese caregivers remove urgency. They move slower, speak softer, breathe deeper. Not because they don't care, but because they understand something critical. Calm cannot come from chaos. Now imagine this: a baby crying, one adult reacting with stress, another responding with stillness. The baby's brain will choose one to follow, and that choice determines how long the crying lasts. But this leads to the final truth. Because all of this builds something much bigger. Not just quiet moments, but a different kind of child. This is not just about stopping crying. It's about shaping the brain from the beginning. Because every moment of calm regulation creates neural patterns. Patterns of safety, patterns of control, patterns of emotional stability. And neuroscience shows early regulation directly impacts future behavior, attention span, emotional control, stress tolerance. Now think about this: a baby who grows up constantly overstimulated versus a baby raised in calm, structured regulation. One develops reactivity, the other develops control, and that difference expands over time. Less crying, better sleep, stronger focus, and eventually, a more stable mind. But here is the truth most people ignore. There is no quick fix. This works because it is consistent. Small actions, repeated daily, calm responses, repeated every time. And over time, the result becomes automatic because the brain adapts to patterns, not intentions. And the pattern you create early becomes the child's default state. Now, I want to hear your opinion. Which part made you stop and think for a second? Was it the calm, the rhythm, or the way babies feel everything you feel? If this made sense to you, just comment. I liked the video. And if you're someone who wants to raise a child with more peace, more emotional balance, subscribe to the channel now. Because this kind of knowledge doesn't just help in one moment, it shapes an entire life.